I'd like to, hello, I'd like to welcome Miss Selma, I'd like to welcome Miss MYRIAM HRIBAR and Miss Simone Liesschke. Liesschke, okay, who was joining us by teleconference today. My name is Mark Pearson. I am the chair of the Select Committee on Animal Cruelty Laws in New South Wales. I would like just to help set up the scene here for you. We are here in the Macquarie Room at New South Wales Parliament House, and I have with me the 8 other members of the committee, most of which have the title Honourable. Lou Amato, Mark Banasiak, Miss Abigail Boyd, Sam Faraway, Matthew Mason-Cox is not here, sorry, Walt Secord, Vic Meach, Emma Hurst, and members of the public and the media are also present, and the proceedings are being recorded by Hansard. So could you please state your full name, commencing with Ms. HRIBAR, your full name and your job title for the record, and take either an oath or an affirmation.
Thank you. My name is MYRIAM HRIBAR. I'm retired, and my affirmation is I solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. And Miss Liesschke?
So my name is Simone Victoria Liesschke. I'm a laboratory technician. And I solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
So would either or both of you like to commence with an opening statement?
Yes. Simone and I have prepared this statement together, and it's Miriam that's reading it.
Okay, well, thank you for that.
So, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak at this hearing. I was a volunteer at Wagga Pound from late 2010 to May 2015. And in 2010, I went to TAFE and completed the Animal Studies Cert 2 course. At the same time, Simone was also a volunteer and was completing her Bachelor of Animal Science degree. We have made 5 points. 1. Wagga Pound and all pounds have no independent government body checking and monitoring them. If there is legislation that the government expects councils to comply with, then there also must be measures in place to make sure that this legislation is enforced. We agreed with this statement in the review of Wagga Pound in 2016, where it states, it is difficult for the Glenfield Road Animal Shelter to demonstrate that it is compliant with the legislative standards and to ensure that it does so. 2. We saw inappropriate treatment of some animals and even cruelty at Wagga Pound. That is why we so strongly advocate that everyone working with animals should have some formal animal qualifications and also a genuine love and passion for animals. 3. In the review of 2016, it also stated, the physical infrastructure forms one pillar of a well-functioning animal shelter, but without appropriate management, staff and protocols, no shelter will perform well. It also stated, currently, much of the day-to-day functioning of the shelter is not defined in a protocol or procedure. It leaves management largely blind to what is actually occurring at the facility. We think many of the incidents would never have occurred if there had been proper protocols in place. 4. We think that the issues we raised with both Council and the RSPCA have never been properly investigated. If proper investigations had been carried out with detailed documentation, then our questions to both Council and the RSPCA on all the issues we raised would be answered, but they still remain unanswered. We also wonder if thorough investigations were carried out, Why does the same issues keep occurring? 5. We are still seeking further information in regards to the holiday period of 2016-17. We know animals were not cared for properly and suffered. We have put in HIPAA requests to Wagga Council regarding this period and have had to appeal twice so far to the IPC. In its review report, the IPC stated the Council's decision was not justified and they recommended the Council make a new decision. The last report from the IPC was received on the 28th of January this year. If thorough investigations have been undertaken by both the RSPCA and Council, we think this holiday period would never have occurred. That's why we think there should be an independent government body checking, investigating pounds with proper documentation to which HIPAA applies. Without HIPAA, we would never have received so much helpful information. In conclusion, if our experience is an example of how some councils self-monitor their own pounds and investigations are carried out by both councils and RSPCA, then we think animals will continue to suffer needlessly in pounds. We assume that when animals enter the pound, they will be properly cared for and their basic needs met. Instead, for some animals, it was a continuation of the suffering they had already endured. That's why we would really like to see pound reform. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Secord.
Yes, my name is Walt Secord. I'm representing the Australian Labor Party. Can you take us through what you describe in your correspondence as the frozen cat incident?
Yes.
This was a really difficult situation. One of the other volunteers was volunteering at the pound, and she had this really uneasy feeling. And she came around and spoke to me, Miriam, and said, I've got this really bad feeling. Anyway, the next morning, we were contacted very early in the morning with this image of this cat. And we both decided, and Simone also, we went then to the pound in the afternoon and saw this cat in the freezer ourselves. And we couldn't understand why it wasn't bagged, why there were all these claw marks on the freezer wall, why there were all these blood smears. But also, on the Thursday, that was the day before, a woman had come in and she had brought in 3 cats. And when we went in on the Friday, only one of those cats was remaining in the cattery. 2 cats had disappeared.
Now, did you report did you make a report to the RSPCA about your concerns about the cat marks, the clawing? Did you document it, and did you refer it to the RSPCA?
Much later, because that occurred in 2014. In 2015, after I had put in my first report to the RSPCA, I didn't bring up the issue of the frozen cat. It was only when I was sending in my diary notes into council in the following month, and I came across my diary notes and the images of the frozen cat, then I contacted the RSPCA.
I guess what I'm trying to get to is, what was the response to your reports or your concerns when they were reported to the RSPCA?
The only response was that Simone and I put in witness statements.
Okay.
So, Miriam,
That's all.
so it's Lil Marta here from the Liberal Party. In your opening statement, did you mention that did you work at the animal shelter from 2010 to 2015?
Yes, from late 2010 to 2000, yes. Until the volunteer program was suspended. It was suspended, I think it was in May 2015,
Okay.
because they were going to address OH&S issues.
Okay, so you worked at that shelter, and that's where the cat was found, in the shelter, is that right?
Yes, in the freezer.
In the freezer, okay.
Yes.
You documented it in 2015.
No, I documented that in 2014 when it occurred.
Okay, when the incident occurred. Okay, and that's because somebody had a hunch or a feeling that there was a cat in the freezer.
Well, as I said earlier...
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to get my head around it, that's all. I'm just trying to make sense of it all.
So the cat was alive, correct?
Well, we don't know that, but we consider that it was probably alive because
Okay.
we're thinking that two cats disappeared overnight.
Okay, can I ask a question? So who else had access, who else worked there and had access to that facility? So apart from yourself, who else worked there?
Pardon?
So who else worked at that facility, at that pound?
At the facility,
Yeah.
the staff employed by council worked there, and then we were volunteers and we came in the public opening hours.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that.
Sorry, just going back to what my colleague took you to in terms of the RSPCA. So they asked for two statements, a statement from you and a statement from the other witness who could corroborate.
Simone.
Yeah, okay.
I contacted the RSPCA,
yes.
and they then contacted me and asked for a witness statement,
Yep.
and then they also asked if anyone else observed this, and Simone, I provided a witness statement as
Okay,
well.
and what happened then?
That's what.
Yeah,
Thank you for speeding
Nothing.
up the process.
I think that's you.
So did you hear anything from the RSPCA afterwards?
No,
So did they interview you?
no.
Did they come to the facility?
We were informed by council that the RSPCA had visited the facility.
Uh-huh.
The only issue that I am aware of that was investigated thoroughly by the RSPCA is the Saviour incident.
Sorry, I'm stepping away from the examples here, but
Just
I think...
introduce yourself, Emma. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, this is Emma Hurst from the Animal Justice Party. Just looking at your submission, you do state in the submission that you talk about the statute of limitation for any authority to bring about proceedings under the Protection of Cruelty to Animals Act.
Yes.
And you say that limitation period should be much longer. Can you explain why you think that statute of limitation should be reviewed?
Well, we didn't realise that you could only, it only lasted for 12 months, if that's correct. That's what I was informed.
That is correct, yes.
Yes. So, like finding information and putting in information under, asking for information under GIPA, it all takes time. And we're also juggling with everything else in our lives. So it does take time. And we wanted to be very careful that the information we had was correct. And like within 12 months, it's very, very hard to get everything, all the evidence collected.
This is Emma Hurst again. Just another thing in your submission, you talk about an independent office for animal welfare to enforce animal cruelty laws. Can you explain why you think that would be better than the current model that's in place?
Well, I want an independent government body because I want a body that is answerable and that you can get information under GIPA.
Mm-hmm. So it's more about transparency and accountability than anything else to you?
Yeah, and also that's properly funded as well.
Okay. Funded.
Yeah, adequately funded.
Do you, it's Walter again. Do you see a conflict between a charitable organization providing animal welfare and being an enforcement agency at the same time? Do you see a conflict in those roles?
I think it's very difficult. I just don't think that a charitable organisation should be enforcing government legislation.
So is your evidence that the fact that your concern seems to be that pounds, particularly Wagga pound in this instance, has not been properly monitored or regulated by an external authority in terms of the standard of care for the animals in the pound?
I think all pounds should be monitored, because the thing is, I don't think you can assume that councils automatically comply to legislation, and I think self-monitoring doesn't work.
Okay, so in the time that you were employed at Wagga Pound...
I wasn't employed, I was a volunteer.
Oh, it's the same thing in law. So did you actually see an RSPCA inspector come to the pound at all during the time that you were there?
No.
Do a spot inspection or whatever?
No, and I didn't either.
An officer from the Animal Welfare League?
No.
Okay. Mr. Banasiak?
Thank you. Mr. Manaziak from Shitters Fishers Farmers. Just touch on your comments about the suggestion of an independent authority. What gives you confidence that a government will fund it correctly when we've seen in other instances where the government hasn't funded things properly, like ICAC, like the Rural Fire Service, like national parks? What gives you confidence that this independent authority will be given the adequate funding that you believe it deserves?
I think, like everything, it'll rely on public pressure, maybe. People will have to voice that that's a really important priority for them to have that area properly funded, and then hopefully governments listen and fund it.
But is that not government pressure, or isn't that public pressure already there with the RSPCA and the Animal Welfare League? You know, quite a lot of people, the public, look at those organisations quite fondly, generally speaking, and I would suggest that the public pressure is already there to fund these organisations properly. So yeah, I have trouble reconciling that this independent authority would be properly funded because the public's going to pressure the government.
I just think that if you have legislation that, you know, the government expects you to comply with, I don't think you should be relying on a charity. I think you should be relying on another government body. And I agree with you, I don't know whether there will be adequate funding, but I think that's what responsible government should be doing.
We agree on that point.
And it's part of the journey we're on here by having a committee looking at this very issue. Ms. Abigail Boyd.
Abigail Boyd from the Greens. Just a couple of questions for you. Firstly, just in relation to the pound, how many volunteers were there compared to people who were being paid to work there?
In comparison to how many people were paid?
Yeah.
At the time when we were volunteers, there were 4 paid staff members, sometimes 5. It sort of varied. With volunteers, it was very, it's really difficult because there were some volunteers that just came really irregularly, and then there were other volunteers who came really regularly. But there weren't many many regular volunteers.
And how did you get to be a volunteer? What were there any qualifications required, or was there an interview process?
No, I just put in an application, I think, at council, and just said that I was interested in volunteering. And because I like animals, and I thought if I'm going to volunteer with animals, I should go and get some training.
So was training provided by the pound, or do you got?
No, there wasn't any. No, there wasn't really any training provided at the pound.
So
that has changed now. I think the volunteers do get training, but when I volunteered, it was just a walkthrough of things that occurred there.
Yeah, that was the same for me as well.
So the employees, did they have qualifications?
No.
So even the people paid to run the pound didn't have qualifications?
No.
So there's pounds being run with a bunch of people who don't have any particular qualifications in working with animals. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes.
And
that has changed at Wagga Pound, but there are still pounds where people work that don't have any animal qualifications.
And despite that, we don't have regular investigations or inspections being run by anybody.
No.
That's interesting.
And,
okay.
And is it true that the change that's happened at Wagga Pound is really as a consequence of adverse publicity about the very evidence you just gave regarding the cat and other matters?
This is my opinion. I think that if we hadn't have gone to media and if we hadn't persisted, I don't think the changes would have occurred, because I wrote my first letter to council in 2011, and I subsequently wrote some more letters and had meetings and a couple of discussions, and I was always reassured that everything was going to be better and that things had changed. And what prompted me to write to the RSPCA was that the volunteer program had been suspended, but I was still going there just as a member of the public. And it was when I saw the feral cat in the crush cage, and I went there on the Friday and it had no food or water, and another volunteer was there on the Saturday and it was the same scenario. And then I went on Monday and it was still in the same crush cage, in the same angle, no food, no water, no litter, no bedding, etc. And I thought, I can't help these animals anymore as a volunteer. I'm going to report them to the RSPCA. And then I raised up all the other, in that first letter, I raised up lots of other issues about dogs left to die and, the really thin dogs not taken to the vet, the treatment of feral cats and how cats are classified as feral. I raised the issue of, inadequate bedding for dogs, broken beds, animals left to sleep on cement when it was -1 degree, animals constantly with no water, especially cats and mother cats and kittens that didn't have any food. And I also raised the issue of the deposit tins being checked regularly, especially in winter.
So is it your view that, and again, just sort of reflecting on your submission, that there's a couple of changes that could be made in relation to the way that pounds in particular are regulated? I note in your submission that you mention having specific legislation or regulations in relation to pounds. Do you think that greater enforcement and inspection would have to go along with any of that kind of legislative reform?
Definitely.
And
I think pounds have to be regularly inspected. And I mean, there are some small pounds I think that aren't even open to the public. So I think every pound has to be inspected. And see, I find some anomalies. For example, because again, this is my opinion, and this is just a general comment. I often think that pounds are a low priority with council, and it was interesting when I was reading the OLG pound report, and now pounds are listed individually. Now, when you see statistics that say, for example, 135 cats came in and 135 cats are euthanised or not deemed rehomeable, and I look at that statistic and I think, what, not one pet cat, not one sick cat, not any kittens, you know, to go to rescue. It's just, this is the easiest thing I can do. 135 come in, 135 are euthanised. I don't think that is accurate.
And I'm sure we agree. So we're going to have to conclude your evidence there. I'm sorry. And there are members who want to send you questions on notice. I don't think we've asked you to take any questions on notice, have we? So look, I really appreciate your evidence, both your evidence today. It's very helpful actually in linking us to the Animal Welfare Act, or Companion Animals Act, sorry, which covers pounds, which I think is going to be soon under review as well. So thank you very much for your evidence, and we'll conclude now until 11 o'clock.